Hello, this is Olliemathews, and this is part 3 of my series, My Life with Narcissistic Parents. In my last video, I talked about my narcissistic mother's rage and aggressiveness, and my father too a bit. In this video, I kind of want to go into her negligence as well, and really the defining moment of her negligence, and something that really shaped me in who I am, and had profound impact on me from a very early age. Like I said, for basically the first 5 years of my life, it was me and my mother in the house. When my father would work, and my brother hadn't been born yet. And back then, my parents were partiers. Really more my mother than my father. My father was kind of is a weird dude. Comes from a really weird family, like my whole father's side, and I'm going to talk about that eventually too. Just how bizarre they all are. But my mother and her sisters were definitely wild children. Without question. And I guess that translated into my mother once they were married. I mean, because she got married in her early 20s. So, this is pre me, and I talked about me starting kindergarten at 4, and this is right around the same time as when I started kindergarten. Now, because my parents were partiers and they always wanted to be going out doing something, that meant they always needed babysitters. And the only real relative I had close to me at that time was my Aunt Ginny, who was my mom's sister, who was living with my mother's mother, who was also a narcissist, my narcissistic grandmother. My narcissistic grandmother was also a partier, couldn't be bothered with babysitting. And I believe at the time my Aunt Ginny was, I know at the time, she was going through nursing school, so she didn't have like a lot of spare time. She was dating my Uncle Mario, so I'm sure she didn't want to always have to be babysitting a 4-year-old. So this meant my mother would basically leave me with anybody she could find to babysit me. Now my mother, one thing, and I talked about this once before online, I had made mention to it. My mother has an obsession with gay people. She's what you'd call a quote-unquote fag hag, and that's nothing against gay people or anything. That's the term they use. That's what my mother is. So anything involving gay men and gay, like, she's all about it. So, and I remember we were in a ShopRite, and she heard some guy say something that made her spark a conversation with him. And to make a long story short, this guy was like a high school actor, and he was doing a play, and my mother thought it was great, and he had this free time. So my mother basically got this guy to come over to the house and babysit. So my parents go out, and this guy and he's gay, and he has three of his buddies come over. Okay. And 2 of them start getting aggressive with me. They take me into the back room, and bad stuff, real bad stuff. And I'm not going to get into gory details because I don't want to put anybody else in a spot, but you can imagine. Okay, it wasn't pretty, and it was 3 friends and the other guy. The guy who was responsible, you could tell he was upset, but he wouldn't stop it. And I freaked. And this guy knew that I was going to be a problem. And I knew it was wrong at the time, and this guy knew it was a problem. So I remember waiting up, like he tried to put me to bed, and I acted like I was asleep, and I remember staying on because I was traumatized, and I just wanted to tell my mother or my father, and I thought at the time something I hear them pull up, I hear them walk in, and it's just me and this guy, the guy in the house, and the time the guy was supposed to be babysitting me. And the guy, as soon as my mother walks in, was like, listen, I gotta tell you, I invited some friends over. They're a little weird. One of them pulled his pants down in front of Matthew. That was my name at the time. Me expect like, oh my God, this guy is. I hear my mother let out one of her deep belly laughs like she thought it was the funniest thing she ever heard in her life. Why even say anything? It's like, Jesus Christ, oh my God, is this what I'm here for? They've already told me a million times I have, how I feel doesn't matter. What I say doesn't matter. I don't matter. I'm one of their possessions. Okay, they can do whatever they want to me. Is great, so this is another thing I got to deal with. 2 days later, my mother brings me to this guy's play, which is a rendition of the crucifixion. And his 3 friends that came over, as it turned out, were all in the play. And the main guy who did it was Jesus. And my mother and I just wanted out. As soon as I saw what was going, I wanted out. And my mother's like, just sit here or I'll beat the death off. I'll beat you till you're dead. That's just what she said to me in the middle of the. And this is just some stupid, high school, ridiculous production in a VFW. Literally at a VFW. And this is what I got to sit through. And my mother's like, oh, we're going up. We got to say after the show. We got to say. And here comes the guy, the main guy and his friends, in full Jesus makeup and horns and blood. And I'm 4 years old. And this is the guy and his friends just 2 days later did the worst shit ever. And my mother's laughing about it. And there he is in full makeup in front of me like this. And he gets right in my, how you doing, Matthew? Awful. Awful. Some years later, when I was an adult, it's Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is always at my father's side of the family, my Aunt Mary Rose's house. And I guess there's some conversation going on with the parents who were at that point in their 50s. And I was in my late 20s, probably early 30s at the time. About how things have changed. And my mother goes, oh yeah, I remember this one time that, this guy was watching Matthew and, he came in and she told the story. Told me he pulled his pants down, and I laughed. She goes, I guess these days you get in trouble for that. And I remember people in my family looking at my mother did she really just say this? And I got so angry. I looked at her and I'm like, do you really think that's all that happened? And I walked out. You would think one of my family members would have come after me and what is going on here? But no, everything is swept under the rug in my family. But that's where you go with, for negligence. There was another girl my mother had hired to paper girl. She was just delivering papers. My mother's like, hey, do you want to babysit my kid? That night she comes in and she was this angry butch girl. And she didn't like me from the get. I wanted to watch something on TV. And that day, this was pre-cable. This was pre-cable. And the TV my parents had at the time had a dial on it. And you could pop the dial off and you couldn't. So I was watching something. She turned something else on and took the dial off so I couldn't change the channel. And I'm 4 or 5 years old, so I get upset. So what she then proceeds to do for the next 2 hours is sit on my chest and just make me cry and then physically torture me all night for 2 hours till I pass out. So bad it was that, this happened in the summertime, so all the windows were open. My neighbor heard it. heard me screaming. Came over to the house the next day, like, what's going on over here? Because I heard Matthew screaming at the top of his lungs, crying. My mother's like, oh, I wasn't even here. So then my mother comes in, because at this point I didn't even say anything. Why bother? She ain't gonna say anything that I'm getting raped by 3 guys in the house and thinks it's funny. She ain't gonna say anything about this. But because what I didn't realize, because somebody else had heard it, now she quote unquote cares. Well, what happened? And I told it to her. And now my mother saw it as an opportunity in front of the neighbor to be like, oh, wait till I see him. The neighbor's like, just call the police. My mother wouldn't call the police because she didn't want the police in there knowing what she was doing to me. So, and that's what abusers do. And my mother's like, oh, well, I took care of it and she'll never be back. And I saw that girl a couple weeks later because, you know, she was about 16, 17. And, well, she had to be 17 because she was in a car the next time I saw her. She pulled up and, you know, I remember I was in front of my house playing in the front yard, which I could do because my mother didn't pay attention to where I was. Pulls up in her car and just yells out the window, I'll see you real soon, Matthew, and drives away. So whatever my mother said to her was pretty much meaningless. She felt comfortable enough to come back to see me in front of the house, stop and threaten me. Negligence. Terrible. And once again, this is another one of these things that I've been dealing with for 40 years. And you can't go back and tell, you know, you can't get resolution from my mother or my father at that matter. Because they'll just gaslight you at that point. Oh, it didn't happen the way, oh, you didn't understand. And back then it was different. It wasn't different. You were partying. You didn't need to be going anywhere. You were 24, 25, 26 years old at that point. And you probably realized you were too young to have kids. You didn't really want to be with my father because he was such a friggin' loser. I suffered for it. I suffered for it. Okay? Whether it's negligence or just outright violence toward me, it's equally as destructive. And nobody should have to deal with that. And regardless of my mother being raised by a narcissist, which, you know, I see as all excuses a lot of narcissists use, or well, it's how I was raised. Yeah, but I knew it was wrong. I mean, I knew it was wrong when it was happening. And by the time I became an adult, I really knew it was wrong. And by the time I became a father at 30, okay, I was so well aware of this. There's like no way. My daughter has never heard a bad word out of my mouth towards her. I've never raised a hand to my daughter. How come I know it's wrong? They definitely know it's wrong. And I think anybody who says, oh, well, my parents had it wrong, you're letting them off the hook. Because they were grown-ass people when they did what they did to you. When they did what they did to us. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your own life. Okay? They don't let rapists off because, or child molesters off any easier because they were molested as a child. At some point, you have to know. You have to know better and you have to take responsibility for your own life. And the narcissist really doesn't want to do that. And I think the next video I'm going to talk about is why. Why has it gotten so bad? Why does it seem like it's gotten so bad? And I think a lot of it is generational. You know, I think the baby boomer generation has been the single most destructive force to this society that has ever been seen. Okay, and I'm going to get into their narcissism in the next video because it's really something I have to lay out, and I've had it mostly laid out, and I will. And whether you're a baby boomer yourself or you're raised by baby boomers, if you're a baby boomer yourself, you know, I'm not saying every single baby boomer is like this, But by and large, as a generation, I mean, if you go back starting at the 60s to this point, there is nothing that that generation has touched that they haven't destroyed, that they haven't utterly destroyed, whether it's socially, politically, you know, on a foreign scale, you name it, they got their, baby boomers got their hands in it. It has been utterly destroyed. Whatever side of the political aisle you fall on, either, it's not even a political statement, you know, so much. Everything that that generation has touched has been destroyed. So that's going to be my next video, I think, and because I think it's important. And I'll probably throw in a couple more of my childhood stories as they come along as well. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, ask me any questions, respond to my video, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.